actually said, why would he go if I'm not going? Because I wasn't going to go. I wasn't planning to go. I would go, but I wasn't planning to go. And I said, I don't think he's going to go if I don't go. And that turned out to be right.
This is basically how planning a weekend brunch has gone for me, like every time. It's Friday, May 16th. I'm Jane Coaston, and this is What A Day, the show that stands with Texas Democrats and sports fans who want to ban Republican Senator Ted Cruz from college playoff events. Because when Ted Cruz is in attendance, Texas teams tend to lose. To quote a Democratic Party official, the 9 scariest words for any college fan to hear are, "I'm Ted Cruz, and I'm coming to your game." Now, as a good journalist, I reached out to the Cruz team. Via a spokesperson, I received the following response. The senator has been attending Texas sports games his entire life. When they win, he's there. When they lose, he's there. Okay. On today's show, the Supreme Court appears torn over the enforcement of President Donald Trump's order to end birthright citizenship. And Walmart says it's going to have to raise prices soon because of Trump's tariffs. But let's start with the president's trip to the Middle East. On Thursday, Trump started his day in Qatar before flying to the United Arab Emirates, the last stop on his trip. While in Qatar, Trump visited the United States' largest army base in the Middle East in Doha and took part in a business roundtable. And in the UAE, he toured the Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque and once again regaled an audience with his views on the term groceries.
Costs are way down. Groceries are where they have a term grocery. It's an old term, but it means basically what you're buying, food. It's a pretty accurate term, but it's an old-fashioned sound. But groceries are down, costs are down, eggs are down.
Groceries are now on the list with Hannibal Lecter as things I don't think Trump understands at any level. But groceries aside, this trip wasn't about diplomacy. This trip was about doing deals. $600 billion in deals with Saudi Arabia's government, the details of which remain extremely vague. A nearly $150 billion defense deal with the kingdom, which the White House calls, quote, the largest defense cooperation agreement in U.S. history. There's also a major artificial intelligence deal with the UAE. Qatar Airways ordered 160 Boeing jetliners, with the option to buy more. And of course, there's that gifted plane from the Qatari Royal Family. The country's prime minister told CNN this week that it was just a normal, everyday transaction with absolutely no influence peddling involved.
Why would we buy an influence in the United States? If you look just, in the last 10 years of the U.S.-Qatar relationship, Qatar has been always there for the U.S. when it's needed.
I mean, from our side of the deal, there is that little line in the Constitution about how public office holders aren't supposed to accept, quote, any present, emolument, office, or title of any kind, whatever, from any king, prince, or foreign state without Congress's okay. But sure, I guess that's pretty vague and open to one's own interpretation. So to get a better sense of what Trump's been up to on this trip, I talked to Mohammed Sergie, Gulf editor for Semafor. He's based in the UAE and has been covering the president's travels in the region. Mohammed, welcome to What A Day.
Thank you for having me, Jane.
So this is Trump's first major international trip of his second term in office. Why do you think he chose to go to the Gulf?
Well, it kind of reflects what he did in his first term. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar have become central to a lot of the diplomatic back channels that Trump has undertaken so far in the last, whatever is it now, 120 days or so, as well as the major pools of capital that he can lean on to come to the U.S. and fulfill this vision that he has for the new golden age, as he calls it.
Right. I think listeners and viewers might remember during his first term, the Gulf was pretty central to Trump. There was the photo of him, the president of Egypt, and the king of Saudi Arabia all touching a glowing orb for reasons I still don't 100% understand. So what is it about this region that you think particularly intrigues Trump? Because it seems to really reflect, to me, a vision of foreign policy that is purely transactional.
It does seem that way, and he does use the transactions and the headline figures as a measure of his success of his trip. But I kind of look at it from a longer term perspective. He's been dealing with the Saudis and with the Emiratis and wealthy Gulf investors for a really long time. He sold a yacht to a Saudi prince, I think in the 80s or early 90s. He sold at the Plaza Hotel to the same prince, at Walid bin Talal. So he has this these business transactions on a personal basis, and he's found that these 6 monarchies, and really the 3 powerful ones are Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar, to be good partners for his foreign policy. And they delivered on certain elements of it. So his biggest achievement from his first term, the Abraham Accords, was brokered with the UAE, right? The UAE was a pillar of it in Israel, and he wants to add on to that. So there is a kind of a U.S. security prism interest long term that he's pursuing. But yes, it's the deals, the pomp, the circumstance. It's obvious that he does like that.
One highlight of the trip so far for Trump includes the announcement of a $600 billion investment in the U.S. from Saudi Arabia. Can you break down that deal for us? What's actually in it?
Yeah, that's something I can't break down. I think economists can't do it either. It's a very opaque type of dealings. It comes out as a lot of MOUs, memorandums of understandings, long-term negotiations that follow on. Some of the deals were actually negotiated or even signed prior to the visit months before. And then if we look back to his big headline figure from 2017 when he signed a $450 billion deal, maybe 20% of that were actual transactions or actual deals that have happened. So I always couch it I don't take that as a literal figure. But what is clear, and this is based on reality, the Gulf states have invested trillions of dollars in U.S. equities and treasuries and infrastructure, and they
universities as well.
Exactly. Qatar has backed universities. It's a massive investment, and it will continue to grow because the best companies in the world happen to be in the United States. The best technology that's emerging happens to be in the United States. So they would have invested regardless. They were investing under the Biden administration. So it really doesn't. It's a longer term type of deal between the Gulf states and the United States.
So I think that this gets to my broader question about this trip, which it seems that the general gist of this trip is doing deals. But deals for whom?
Yeah. The conflict of interest that were kind of brewing beforehand, the crypto project that is run by his family, the real estate projects that Eric Trump came in and signed prior to his visit, those haven't been popping up at all. He's traveled with a pretty big entourage of business people. Some of the biggest companies and investment banks and private equity firms in the U.S. are there, also doing deals. So there are real things like Boeing's selling up to 210 jumbo jets to Qatar Airways. Again, Qatar Airways is going to buy either from Boeing or Airbus, and they actually buy from both. But signing it there, making the order there, showing him the commitment, those deals are happening really for the American people and for American companies. I wouldn't say it's happening for Trump. He gets the added benefit of being the person who gets to boast about it and broker it. The diplomacy aspect, I have to say, has taken a much bigger role in both his comments and in the outcomes of this trip. It's been Syria and to some extent Iran, and that's really where the main progress has come through.
You did mention Syria. Trump also met with Syria's interim president earlier this week. It was the first meeting between the U.S. and Syria's top leaders in 25 years. He also announced the removal of U.S. sanctions on Syria to major applause. Can you talk about the significance of that?
Well, even for me personally, it was, I'm from Syria. I'm from Aleppo. I grew up there. And just sitting there and hearing that the sanctions would be lifted, I grew up under sanctions. Sanctions have been placed on Syria since 1979. So those sanctions were crippling. And when he said it, the reaction from the audience, which was vast majority of them were Saudis, they were genuinely just elated, and the applause was continuous. I was watching them, and then I was watching Trump, and Trump kind of steps back and takes it in. I don't know what he was thinking at the time, but he did say it in Qatar that it was a very well received moment, and I think he probably would have done it before if he knew it was going to be such a such a positive thing for him to take credit for, right?
Yeah, and I think, I can't imagine what it must feel like for Syrians to be in that moment. But the Syrian government right now is still in a very tenuous position after former President Bashar al-Assad was ousted. So why lift the sanctions now? And do you think that there are risks as the country figures out how to transition away from the Assads and into a more stable form of governance?
Without lifting the sanctions, there was no chance for the economy to restart. So Syria's GDP declined by about 90% You have 90% to poverty. You can't transfer money into the country, even if you wanted to. If you wanted to do any types of deals with the central bank, if you want to restart power, they get power maybe 2-3 hours a day. So you can't restart factories. It's literally spiraling. So the government is not collecting any revenue either. So it's just one thing after another, and it will snowball. And in the sense, even if people respect Ahmed al-Sharar, they respect his authority and the fact that he liberated the country and all of that stuff. They're not going to join a police force that doesn't pay salaries, right? They'll go back to whoever the benefactor was for them before, and those benefactors are literally warlords, right? I've been back to Syria a couple of times already. Actually, paid for, helped renovate my parents' house, all that stuff. Like, we have to send cash. We have to there's all different ways of doing it. You can't run a country with truckloads of cash. It's just a recipe for disaster. So very, very significant. Without it, definitely going towards failed state.
One place that is interesting that Trump is not visiting is Israel, which is on the verge of a potential major escalation in its war with Hamas in Gaza. Why was Israel left off the list, and what does that say about this administration's priorities?
Yeah, in the 2017 trip, he did go to Israel afterwards. This time, he spoke a little bit about Israel, but it seems to be that the situation in Israel today under the Netanyahu government isn't willing to budge enough to end the conflict the way that Trump is trying to push, and the way that the Arab countries want it to happen. So it would probably not have been a successful tack onto his trip. So that's my read on that.
Mohammed, thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
Thank you, Jane. Appreciate it.
Hey! Following the news cycle during this flood the zone era can feel like being repeatedly run over by a truck, but the truck also has a social media account. I don't like the truck. But people like you tuning out is what the Trump media machine is counting on. On What a Day, we take this dumpster fire of a timeline and compress it into something irreverent, engaging, and fast, so you can get your news without entering the 5 stages of grief. Subscribe to our channel. It helps other people find our show and make sure you don't miss new episodes. And thanks for watching. We appreciate you. What a Day is brought to you by ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol. Let's face it, I'm in my late 30s, so after a night or day with drinks, I don't bounce back the next day like I used to. I have to make a choice. I can either have an amazing time or a great next day. That is, until I found Pre-Alcohol. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic Drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by a PhD scientist to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's a buildup of this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for rough days after drinking. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Every time I have pre-alcohol before I drink, I notice a difference the next day. Even after a night out, I can confidently plan on working out without worry. Spring is here, which means more opportunities to celebrate warmer weather. Before drinks on the patio, that tropical vacation, or your best friend's wedding, don't forget your ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol. Drink one before drinking and wake up feeling great the next day. Go to zbiotics.com/WAD to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use code WAD at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/WAD and use the code WAD at checkout for 15% off.
Headline. Let's just assume you're dead wrong. How do we get to that result? Does every single person that is affected by this EO have to bring their own suit?
Okay, go off, Justice Elena Kagan. The Supreme Court heard arguments Thursday in a case related to President Trump's executive order to end the century-old constitutional right of birthright citizenship. But the arguments in court centered on a more wonky side issue: nationwide injunctions, or, put more plainly, whether one lower court judge can effectively block presidential orders for the entire country. The case comes after 3 federal judges said Trump's birthright citizenship order violated the 14th Amendment and blocked it from going into effect across the nation. Similar injunctions have been issued for some of Trump's other orders, like his cuts to government medical research and efforts to slash the size of the federal workforce. The Trump administration argues these judges have exceeded their authority, but the justices seem torn between wanting to claw back the lower court's abilities to issue these sweeping rulings and the potential consequences for this specific case. Of the court's conservatives, Justice Amy Coney Barrett sounded pretty skeptical of the Trump administration's position, like in this exchange, where Barrett jumped in during Kagan's questioning of Solicitor General John Sauer.
If one thinks that it's quite clear that the EO is illegal, how does one get to that result? In what time frame? On your set of rules without the possibility of a nationwide injunction?
On this case and on many similar cases, the appropriate way to do it is for there to be multiple lower courts considering it, the appropriate percolation that goes to the lower courts, and then ultimately this court decides the merits in a nationwide binding precedent. You have a complete inversion of that through the nationwide injunctions where the district
So, General
courts
Sauer, are you really going to answer Justice Kagan by saying there's no way to do this expeditiously?
Well, I'll refer to my former answers. Rule 23 provides the tools to do so, multiple injunctions.
But you resisted Justice Kagan when she said, could the individual plaintiffs form a class?
Barrett and Kagan, this fall on CBS. It's like Ally McBeal meets The Odd Couple. And Justice Brett Kavanaugh asked Sauer about how the federal government would enforce Trump's order, like what hospitals and states would do with newborns. It's still unclear how the justices will ultimately rule. The court typically wraps up its term at the end of June. Peace talks between Russia and Ukraine were postponed after delegations from both sides failed to meet in Turkey Thursday. Russian President Vladimir Putin Sunday proposed the two nations meet there for direct talks this week. The meeting would have been the first in nearly 3 years. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accepted the offer and quickly upped the ante. He challenged Putin to meet him there face-to-face, and Zelensky pulled up in Turkey as promised. But Putin never committed, and ultimately didn't show. The Kremlin sent a lower-ranking delegation to attend talks instead. Adding to all of the confusion Thursday, the two countries' respective parties showed up in completely different cities. Speaking to reporters in Qatar, President Trump said he wasn't surprised his buddy Vlad was a no-show.
I actually said, why would he go if I'm not going? Because I wasn't going to go. I wasn't planning to go. I would go, but I wasn't planning to go. And I said, I don't think he's going to go if I don't go. And that turned out to be right.
This is basically how planning a weekend brunch has gone for me, like every time. And later, aboard Air Force One, Trump said there would be no movement on a peace deal until he meets with the Russian president.
I don't believe anything's going to happen, whether you like it or not, until he and I get together.
Ain't no party till you get a Trump-Putin party. As of our recording Thursday night, Ukraine and Russia confirmed that their delegations will meet in Istanbul, but it was still unclear when the talks would get underway. The time has come. Executives for Walmart, the country's and the world's largest retailer, said Thursday the company will start raising prices soon because of President Trump's tariffs. I, for one, am shocked. Shocked! On a call with analysts Thursday, Walmart CEO Doug McMillon said the company would do its best to keep prices low, but, quote, given the magnitude of the tariffs, even at the reduced levels announced this week, we aren't able to absorb all the pressure.
We're positioned to manage the cost pressure from tariffs as well or better than anyone. But even at the reduced levels, the higher tariffs will result in higher prices.
Walmart CFO and Executive Vice President John David Rainey said in a CNBC interview the company is trying to navigate the back and forth from the administration, especially around tariffs on China.
Keep in mind, just a week ago, we were at 145% tariffs. Now, we're very appreciative of the progress that the administration has made to get them down to this level, but I would say that it's still too high for consumers. We'd like to see them come down more.
Rainey told the AP the price of bananas is rising, and that he thinks car seats from China could likely cost shoppers an extra $100. The price tag is in for President Trump's planned military parade next month, and it's a doozy. A spokesperson for the Army told the Washington Post it could cost as much as $45 million. The parade is scheduled for June 14th. The official reason behind it is to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Army. But, and I'm sure this is just purely coincidence and not at all an intentional move on the part of the White House, June 14th also happens to be President Trump's 79th birthday. Chalk it up to kismet, I guess. According to planning documents obtained by the Associated Press, the parade is set to include almost 7,000 soldiers, 150 vehicles, and 50 aircraft. It will follow a route from Arlington, Virginia to the National Mall. Permits for a counter-protest have also been filed. And that's the news. One more thing. Let's talk briefly about weightlifting. Yes, weightlifting. There's been a lot of talk online and elsewhere about how lifting weights has become right-coded, or that working out can make you, quote, right-wing, which is bullshit. I've been lifting for more than a decade. Working out is my hobby, kind of my obsession, and quite possibly my absolute favorite thing to do. And I think that working out and lifting weights specifically can be for everyone, because it's truly good for everyone. Building and maintaining muscle mass is amazing for your quality of life, and millions of Americans are starting to agree. As Bloomberg detailed in a piece from last month, more and more people, especially women, are lifting heavy. Women are hitting higher squat totals and learning the wonders of the Romanian deadlift and the truly horrible Bulgarian split squat. But more importantly, more women are getting comfortable with getting strong, at a time when it feels like a whole bunch of people want women to feel weak and disempowered. Many of those women are learning how to lift from Casey Johnston. She's the author of the She's a Beast newsletter. She also has a new book out called A Physical Education: How I Escaped Diet Culture and Gained the Power of Lifting. Casey, welcome to What A Day.
Thank you for having me.
So, something that has always interested me about your work is how you put weightlifting in a cultural, social, and political context. Can you tell me a little bit what you learned about the history of weightlifting in America, especially the secret socialism, which might surprise some people?
Right. We do have this perception that it is the provenance of, the military, cops, there's a sort of even fascistic association with strength. That stems from the two world wars, really. That physical fitness became a focus for a lot of the armies at that time, especially the fascist ones, the Germans and the Italians. But they got all of this physical fitness stuff from a group called the Turners, who came from Germany. A lot of them immigrated to America in the early to mid 1800s, and they established what were called Turner Halls, which were sort of like proto YMCAs. At a certain point, there were tons of them in the US, and they sort of focused on physical education for the community. They didn't like competition, and they didn't like sort of achievement in the way that the American culture did. They were all about sort of fitness for the betterment of the community as a foundation for everybody. So they were around and had an important role in what became our physical culture much later, but it's been sort of lost.
You talk in your book a lot, obviously, about being the only woman on the weight side of the gym so many times. What do you think has changed in your view as a woman who lifts about women and weightlifting since you started working out? Because I think I've seen a shift. I'm definitely seeing more women working out, more women lifting. Maybe that's CrossFit. Maybe that's we all want to eat more. What has happened, or what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think things have changed a lot. It's actually helped having a lot of resources democratized through the internet, because I think that's brought a lot more people in. I think additional research and science have started to establish that there are benefits to exercise in general, but especially weightlifting, that have nothing to do with losing weight, which used to be the sort of big emphasis about any kind of exercise. Now we're learning that weight is not in lockstep with our health, and that a lot of lifestyle habits contribute to our health a lot, whether they change our weight or not.
Something that really impacted me about your book is that about 200 pages in, you write about trying to get your mom to squat and talking to her a little bit about training, and also about how if she wants to be able to do more, she might need to eat more. And it doesn't go great, that conversation. We have generations of women and femme people, from boomers to quote unquote almond moms, who have this long-standing bias against getting bigger, even if it means you're getting stronger or more able to do things. If your clothing size goes up, I know for me, when I started lifting and I stopped being able to fit into button-down shirts like a normal person, I got really stressed out. Why is it important for you to help change that narrative?
I think a lot of people suffer from feeling trapped by all of these ideas about what they should be and what they should look like. And I think that for me and for my mother and for a lot of people, that sort of radiates outward into life, where it's like doing anything worthwhile must involve some pain. And that you, for some reason, need to suffer. And not only does it not work that way, but sometimes the suffering is for no good reason. And sometimes it's specifically to keep us trapped in these vicious cycles of dieting and exercise and focus on our our appearance and ourselves and our own guilt and our own shame when there's many larger forces at work that we deserve to be really angry at, but we're not able to accurately perceive their role in our lives because we're believing the lie that we have to be focused on ourselves first, and that if something isn't working, it's our personal burden.
Casey, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, of course.
That's all for today. If you like the show, make sure you subscribe, leave a review, celebrate Texas Republicans. Yes, Texas Republicans taking steps to end the state's ban on gay sex, and tell your friends to listen. And if you're into reading, and not just about how Texas still has an unenforceable law against sodomy on the books, but on Thursday, Texas legislators came together to move a bipartisan bill repealing that law through the House. Like me, What A Day is also a nightly newsletter. Check it out and subscribe at crooked.com/subscribe. I'm Jane Coaston, and the bill might not pass the Texas State Senate, so if you're in Texas, talk to your state senators. Because come on!